Alright, so it's Tuesday and it's our first video. So it's 8:23 and this is number 7, and I'm going to multiply negative 1 and 4/10 times 3. So the first thing I'm going to do is look at it and say, oh, one's positive. That's good. One's positive and the other one's negative. Therefore, since only one that is negative, I know that my answer is negative because a positive times a negative is negative. So let's go ahead and do that first. So we know our answer has to be negative. And then I just have to go ahead and multiply my numbers like I normally would. So I have 1 and 4/10, and I want to multiply that by 3. So 3 times 4 is 2. 12, that's 2, and I carry the 1. 3 times 1, right, is 3, plus 1 is 4, so I get 4, and I have one number behind a decimal place, so in my answer, I know I'm going to have one number behind a decimal place. And that should make sense, because if I have 1 and 4/10 and multiply it by 3, right, I'm going to get somewhere between, somewhere in the vicinity. It's going to have to be greater than 3 times 1, which is 3, but it can't be that much greater, so I know that my answer is right. So once again, in this problem, I took a negative number times a positive number. I know my answer has to be negative, and I multiply these numbers through. I get 3 times 4, that's 12. I put down my 2, I carry my 1. 3 times 1 is 3, and I add this 1, and that gives me 4. I have one number behind the decimal place in the numbers that I'm multiplying, so I have one number behind the decimal place in my answer. So on this particular one, for extra credit, I'm going to say, I got 4.2, or 4 2/10. How did I decide how many places were going to be behind the decimal in the answer? Okay, and that takes care of your first video. And look, it was less than 2 minutes and 30 seconds. Let's go ahead and do the next one. All right, I'm going to do number 13 from your homework, and I'm actually going to add a little problem to it. So just know that that's part of what I'm doing here. So this is A23. So this is still video A23, number 13 from the homework. So if I have negative 7, the quantity squared, that means I'm going to take negative 7 and multiply it by itself, right, twice. So let's go ahead and do that. So this is going to give me a negative 7 times a negative 7. And that means my answer, I know, is going to be positive, right? Because I have a negative times a negative, and that gives me a positive, right? Both of them have the same sign. So I know my answer is positive. And then, of course, 7 times 7 is 49. So my answer to that is a positive 49. Now, if I don't have the parentheses, I have to be a little bit careful, because order of operation then says, since this isn't in parentheses to do first, I'm going to raise this to the power first, and then I'm going to take the opposite of it. So let's go ahead and do that. So that means I'm going to have the opposite of 7 times 7. Well, 7 times 7, that gives me 49. And then I take the opposite of it. So this time, instead of getting positive 49, I get negative 49. So I think your extra credit, the question I'm going to ask you with respect to this video is, how do you decide if I have negative 3, the quantity squared, inside parentheses? Is that going to be, how do I decide if that's positive or negative? And then if I have negative 3 like this squared, how do I decide if it's positive or negative? And the answer is, if it's the parentheses, right, that means I take this quantity and square it. If I don't have parentheses, that means I take the 7, or whatever this quantity is, and I square it, and then I take the opposite of it. And your extra credit is, what am I watching while I'm making this video? And the answer to that is, I'm watching the Ravens play the Giants. That's it, you guys. I'll see you tomorrow. Take care.